The following is a special video presentation of the Hennepin County Library.
Hi, welcome to Discussions with Robert Kowalski. My name is David Kramer, and we're here to talk about Bob's new book, 8 Steps to a Healthy Heart. Bob is also the author of the 8-week cholesterol cure, which many of you may be familiar with and may have read since it was on the bestseller list for so long. But for those of us who may not be as familiar with your book or your background, would you give us a brief overview of your history of writing, Bob?
Sure. I've been writing exclusively about health and medical matters for the past 25 years now. I'm trained actually to do just exactly that as compared to falling into it. I have 2 degrees in journalism from Iowa State University, whereby I dual majored in the sciences. So I have in effect degrees in both fields, and then went on to additional graduate work in physiology after the master's degree. So after writing about medicine for so long, it literally became a very personal thing for me when at 35 I suffered a heart attack and had to have a bypass surgery. That was in 1978, and frankly, they didn't know then what they know now. We've really come a long way. In fact, when I had that surgery, when dismissed from the hospital, my surgeon said, "Bob, you had something wrong. We fix it. Forget this ever happened. Go out and enjoy your life." That was pretty much the philosophy.
That was the advice,
Yeah. And unfortunately, the techniques of surgery weren't as good in those days, and that advice wasn't very good. As a result, the disease just got worse and worse, and I knew that I still had blockage and risk of death. I lived for 6 years as a cardiac cripple, just literally fearing life itself, fearing everything about life. And in 1984, I was told that I'd need a second bypass, and in a peculiar way, that started a whole new look of life for me. It was my rebirth, as it were. That time around, I was given good, solid advice. I got into a cardiac rehab program and started learning about cholesterol. In fact, I gave myself an assignment not to write a book, but really, in effect, to save my own life. As a medical writer, I had access to the medical literature. I worked with a medical librarian, and we did an exhaustive literature review of everything known about cholesterol and methods of reduction. And I became an expert in cholesterol control, put together a program that worked for me, brought my own dangerously high level of cholesterol from 284 down to 169 in just 8 weeks. My doctor was so impressed by it that he tested 25 patients at the hospital to see if it had worked for others. It did. As a writer, I said, there's a book here. And there was. It was, of course, the 8-week cholesterol cure that remained on the New York Times bestseller list for 115 weeks. It's now in 18 languages in 31 countries. Now, as you might expect, that kept me busy, real busy. I was working harder and longer than I ever worked in my life. And I started to wonder about that. Now 5 years had passed after the second bypass, and I was thinking, well, maybe those vessels are clogging up again. And I started getting concerned. Well, maybe I should slow down. I talked about this to a friend of mine that I had met, who's the director of the Heart Institute of the Desert, just outside of Los Angeles. And he said, "Bob, why don't we just put your mind to ease? Do an angiogram." That's where they put that tube up, the catheter inside, to take a direct look at the arteries of the heart. And what they found was just amazing. In fact, the doctors were blown away. They said they had never seen anything like this before. Quite literally, in the words of the cardiac surgeon, the bypass vessels then, that day, looked as though they were put in the week before. No blockage at all. And the native arteries, those that God gave me, that weren't bypassed in, that had been blocked before, were now clear and flowing. I had eliminated heart disease. And that's when I realized that, okay, cholesterol was an important part, but I was also doing a lot of other things in order to get myself to this level of health where I was feeling, not only did the records show that I was okay, but I knew that I was feeling better than I ever had in my life. Feeling stronger and more fit than I had when I was in my 20s. I thought, once again, this is information that has to be shared with people, because indeed there are, this figure is frightening, tens of millions of people out in America today have had bypass surgery, heart attacks, angioplasties. They didn't die, they survived, but they're really not alive either. They're almost like the undead, as it were. The spirit is gone. We've all known people like that who, yeah, they go back to work, but they're not quite the same. They don't tell the jokes anymore. They almost never smile. They walk through the job really not pushing themselves. They're just not the same. Again, the spirit is gone. What this book purports to do is to take people step by step in a recovery process that's not only going to free them up from the heart disease itself and keep them from dying, but rather to restore them to complete, vibrant health.
You mentioned that that heart disease really is the #1 killer in this country, and a lot of people may not be aware of that, of the comprehensiveness of that.
For men and women.
Yes, that's very true. And why do you think that there hasn't been more written about a total recovery package like your book does? It seems as though a lot of it's good, sound, basic advice that if people that have gone through this experience need some direction in terms of how to regain and maintain a healthy heart. I mean, they've had bits and pieces probably, but not one compendium like you've put together.
Right. Two reasons here. Number one, up until recently, we haven't known what to do. It's only been within the past couple of years that we've really learned what it takes to make a complete reversal of heart disease. In the past, that was just a sort of a prayer that we could at least slow down the disease. The medical textbooks define heart disease as a chronic, progressive illness. Basically means it just keeps getting worse until you die.
But what you're saying is that's not true anymore.
That's no longer true. And it's, again, only within the last couple of years that we really have a grasp on that. The second thing is that in terms of the way the book is put together, I've been there myself. I know that it's not just this aspect or that aspect that's important, but all of these kinds of things, and viewed through a very personal and emotional kind of level. If a doctor is working in one specific area of medicine, he tends to stress that part. And sometimes it's a little impersonal at the same time. People who have read the book tell me that it's rather as though I was sitting next to them and sort of just put my hand on them and say, listen, you're going to make it. It's an attaboy kind of thing. I cheer them through the whole procedure and keep them encouraged that this is what's going to happen.
Yeah, it is written in a very breezy style and one that is inspiring, I think. You'd also mentioned, and I guess this ties in what you just said, that in the book, that recovering from heart disease or heart-related problem is like recovering from an auto accident.
Right.
It isn't as though you can't recover. An auto accident, you look at a short-term probably inconvenience and then long-term health.
Right.
But that has not been the case with heart-related problems.
Exactly, and it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Let's go back to that auto accident. Let's say you have a really bad one, so bad that you're actually unconscious. You wake up the next morning in the hospital and the doctor says, boy, you're lucky to be alive. You totaled your car. As you can see, you're in a cast up to your waist. We may even have to do a little restorative surgery on you. Afterward, you'll be in a period of physical rehabilitation. But let me make you feel better right off the bat and say that within a period of months, a year at the very most, you're going to be 100% whole, no cane, no crutches, you won't have a limp. In fact, you'll probably be stronger and more fit thanks to that rehab program. Now, you don't think of yourself as an accident victim for the rest of your life. You just go through this process. You have a right to be angry. Certainly, you're not happy that this happened, but you're not going to become emotionally despondent and think, oh, my life is over. You simply go through the steps necessary, you make your recovery, and forget it ever happened. Go on and enjoy your life. That's what we have today in heart disease, but we didn't always have it, and unfortunately the public perception hasn't kept up with what medicine can deliver.
Well, it's true. I know that the two of the common themes throughout your book are exercise and the correct diet. And those two things are really learned habits, I think.
Sure.
They're habits that you get out of or that you can get into. And it's not something, you don't have to be an athlete to be a person that exercises. You just have to be somebody that has the will to do it.
That's exactly right. In fact, there's some really good news along these lines. People think in terms of exercise, they sort of hearken back to the 80s when we were learning no pain, no gain, or go for the burn, all those kinds of Jane Fonda terminologies. Today we know that we don't have to do that. We just don't have to do that. For the heart attack patient, or for those who have come through bypass, they'll go through a period of 12 weeks of a structured cardiac rehab program. And that's wonderful, and I really encourage people strongly to do it because they're guided step by step through this.
Especially if you've never been involved with that kind of a program.
Precisely. They show you how to use the equipment, how much is enough, how much you can deal with. In fact, just as a side note there, that was one of those turning points in my life. I took the program myself, and 6 weeks through it, I was working out on the treadmill one morning, just walking along, my heart was beating, a little sweat on my face, feeling pretty good. And I had the electrodes on. The nurse up front was able to monitor just what was going on in terms of heart rate and my EKG. And she said, Bob, step it up a little bit. I thought, why? I'm doing fine. She said, no, we can get your heart rate up a little higher than that. So I put the speed up a bit, and now I'm really huffing and puffing, keeping up, and my heart is just pounding like crazy. Revelation, I'm not dying. I'm not having a heart attack. I'm working harder than I have in 6 years, harder than I ever would at home, in whether I was working or playing or making love or anything else. I knew I would never do anything as strenuous as what I was doing that moment on the treadmill, and I knew I was free at last. I don't know if you really can comprehend the feeling after 6 years of fearing that overexertion could kill me, to now know that I could do this level of exercise and be perfectly okay. Wow. No longer a heart patient. Now I was well on my way to recovery. Then after that, we can get into this nice period of just keeping cardiovascularly fit. And again, we come back to that good news. It takes 30 minutes a day of activity, whatever you want to do, whether it might be a brisk walk, riding a bike, swimming laps in a pool, climbing stairs. Some people will say, now, 30 minutes, you may think that that's easy, but it's not easy for me. I don't have 30 minutes. My day is just jammed from the time I wake up in the morning till the time I go to sleep at night. I don't have a half an hour to work out. Okay, tell you what I'm going to do. More good news, more research that just came out in '91. Simply enough, we don't have to do it all at one time. I would suggest to a person like that that instead of taking a coffee break in the morning, now, what's the typical scenario of a coffee break? You've had a tough day in the office, you've got all kinds of problems, you go downstairs, grab a cup of caffeine, use that to wash down a fatty donut, and sit around complaining about your job and your boss to somebody else who's going to tell you how miserable it is to work in this rat hole. And now you go upstairs and you feel rotten. Instead of that, put on your coat, go outside, and take a brisk walk. You'll come back feeling 100% better. You'll avoid the fatty donut. You'll avoid the confrontation. You'll avoid the caffeine. And you've got half your day's requirement of exercise in already. So you kill all those birds with one stone. Do the same thing in the afternoon, and you've done it. You're home free, and that's really all it takes.
And usually you'd feel more energized as a result of that walk, too.
Sure, absolutely so. Now, if you want to do more exercise than that, certainly you can. Now, to be really honest, I do. I have learned that I feel even better when I do more. When I'm on tour with one of my books, traveling around the country, I do the walking program, and that keeps me on a kind of even keel. But when I have an opportunity to go do a good strenuous workout, I find that it just energizes me. It makes me feel good, and it makes me also more attuned with my own body. Ironically, in the book I put it this way: how bypass surgery made me a better skier. That seems an irony, but I was never a really good skier before. I was never really that strong a person or coordinated, and I was always falling and not having a very good time of it. After the period of recovery after the second bypass, the following year I went out on the slopes, and it was though everything suddenly clicked. All those lessons that I took made sense, and I was just swooshing down the hill, got down to the bottom, wasn't even breathing heavy. And I thought, isn't this terrific? I can really enjoy this more.
Yeah.
It's actually made me a better skier, a better golfer. Everything I approach now, you've got that confidence of well-being.
Yeah. That cloud that you had over your head, so to speak, after the first surgery was gone.
It was gone.
And you've taken control over your life, as you talk about in your book, when you say, really, you are in control of your destiny, your world. And your book helps people determine how they can best do that for their individual cases.
Exactly.
Tell us a little bit. You talk. There are 8 steps, as you list them in the book, to a healthy heart. Please touch on a couple of those that you feel are the most important, or all of them if you want to.
Okay.
And then I know that within each of those you have ideas about, for example, exercise programs or diets or lifestyles, returning to work, for example, or an active sex life, or building a support base for people. Just touch on a few of those so that people have a sense of what your book is about.
Sure. Well, for openers, the main theme, that's sort of the recurrent theme throughout, is this concept of confidence, that you're going to make a 100% recovery. We're not just going to keep you alive a few more years, but we're going to add a lot of life to those years all the way through. So we're going to grapple with those emotions that we deal with after the heart attack, the anger, frustration, futility, denial, depression. Get that out of the way. Then we're going to learn something about our hearts. You don't have to become a cardiologist, for heaven's sake, and learn every bit of the anatomy, but we should at least know how the heart functions, what the coronary arteries are, how the valves work. Learn how the heart should work, learn what went wrong, learn how to make sure that it's never going to happen again. That way, when you go in and talk to your doctor, you can now have the empowerment of knowledge. You'll be able to discuss this more intelligently with him. You'll understand the tests that he or she is going to be performing in the years to come. With that in mind, we can go on now to the next step. Before anything else, we're going to deal with getting right back into the swing of life. Returning to work, returning to an active sex life. Both of those are really important because they are integral parts of our being. All of us need some gainful activity. As much as we talk about retirement, even after people retire, they need something to keep them going, something to make them feel of worth. And so we want to return to that feeling of productivity right off the bat, normalcy, that's right. And so at that point now, it's a matter of learning to cope with some of the stresses that are going to come along. And at work, there certainly may be some stresses.
True.
We can't eliminate stress from our lives. That's impossible. And I don't think that we'd even want to. And who wants to go to a mountaintop and become a monk sitting there with a bowl of rice?
That's realistic.
That's not realistic. In terms of stress, though, we can break it up. If the stress is continuous, it's kind of like a rubber band. You just keep pulling and pulling and pulling, eventually it's going to snap. But if you just go back and forth, that elasticity can go on forever. That's the way it is with stress. If we can learn to break it up through the day, we could deal with it so much more effectively. The coffee breaks that I was referring to earlier, or the notion of simply taking 5 minutes, close the door, turn the lights down, do any of a number of things. I like to do deep breathing exercises. Just sort of sit back, quite literally, just sit back, relax the shoulders, close the eyes for a moment, and really concentrating on that refreshing breath coming in. 5 minutes of that, it's amazing how good people can feel. I've even done this with my son. He was 7 years old when I started teaching him to do these things, and he gets the biggest kick out of it because now he can use that. He told me, I didn't even tell him to do it. He says, Dad, you know, I've been using that breathing before I take tests in school.
It's a good idea. Yeah.
And he said, this way, I get real nervous just before the test, and instead of just waiting for her to pass out the papers, I'll sit at my desk and just sort of relax like you told me to. I'll close my eyes for a minute and just breathe a few times, and then I start taking the test, and I do a lot better. Now, from the mouths of babes. We're talking about a little kid here. This can become part of your lifestyle. Some people like to do just a few stretches. Just get up out of the chair, and I talk about various stretching things that you can do in the office just to loosen the body up. Breaks up the stress during the day. Do something nice for yourself. After my heart attack, excuse me, the second bypass, I realized that I was doing things for everyone else, but not for myself. And most of us are like that. So I try to schedule some things into each day that's for me. Maybe it's watching a tape that I've got on the VCR of one of my favorite comedy shows, like Barney Miller or Coach, and watching that in the evening and relaxing. I've gone back to some things that are sort of out of my childhood. I bought myself a yo-yo. I used to be really, really good at my yo-yo. I could walk the dog and rock the baby and all those kinds of things. And I bought a yo-yo and I started playing with it again. Get it back. You start concentrating on that, it breaks the monotony of the day, the stress of the day. All those little things. What I try to do is share with people some things that maybe you wouldn't like to play with a yo-yo, but there's something else that's in there that will strike a chord for you, as well as specific coping techniques to deal with immediacies of stress. Then the next metaphor of life is this thing of getting back to an active sex life. I think that's enormously important and vastly ignored by the majority of doctors. Gosh, especially for men, and indeed both men and women are equally victimized by this disease, but picture the scenario of the man recovering now from his heart attack, being discharged from the hospital. He's in a wheelchair, as is always the case. Even if you have a hangnail, they put you in a wheelchair to get you out of the hospital. Got the nurse and your wife pushing the wheelchair. There's your car parked at the curb. They open the door for you. You get in the passenger side. She puts your bag in, closes the door for you. She drives your car, and you go home. She opens the door, takes out your bag, opens the door of the house. You go inside. Now she says, well, we really shouldn't make love because we don't want you to get overly stressed. And the doctor hasn't really talked about this yet, so we don't know what to do. Now, I don't know about you, but it seems to me that every man that I've ever known thinks he's really great at least two things in life, and that's driving a car and his prowess in bed. And here you are, you're not driving your own car anymore, and you can't have sex. It's emasculating and it's depersonalizing. A part of your whole being is gone suddenly. No wonder people get depressed. I'm going to just break this myth right now. This is the end of it. And this is also going to come as a blow to some male egos, but in a normal, healthy relationship between man and wife, or even if you've got a good established relationship over time with someone, the energy expenditure of having sex is no greater than walking up 2 flights of stairs. That information hasn't gotten across to people. If you wanted to, you could have sex the very first day coming home from the hospital without any fear, and yet fear prevails throughout this entire aspect. I tell the story of a woman, after her husband's heart attack, every time they made love, she held his hand. And at first he thought that was really kind of romantic and tender, till he found out she was taking his pulse.
That'll do it.
Yeah. Hard to have good bounce-off-the-wall sex when you're doing that. And we got to get rid of those kinds of attitudes. Let's see, what else should we consider? Definitely the cigarettes come into play. Now, no question, if the person who quits smoking after the heart attack has literally cuts the risk of a future problem in half by quitting, and the risk is gone within 2 days after quitting the cigarettes. Now, I'm not going to tell you that it's just a piece of cake, just get it done,
Sure.
just quit, never smoke again. I smoked 2 packs of cigarettes for years. I know how tough it can be. But today it's easier than it was, frankly, even when I quit, for 2 reasons. One is that society no longer encourages smoking. It's hard to find a place even to smoke anymore, so you're just sort of catching up with where society is, and you've got a lot of support from everyone around you.
Yeah.
The second thing is we've got these new nicotine patches that you can wear, and it eliminates the withdrawal symptoms. So now all you need to do is concentrate on not reaching for the pack of cigarette,
Habits.
learning to break those habits, and I work through how to learn to live without the cigarettes. You learn to live with them. You learn to do all these things with a cigarette. Now it's time to learn to do without each of those cigarettes. So those are some of the really important steps along the way.
I know too, in one of the chapters you emphasized the impacts of cholesterol on your diet, and you have a nicely detailed table of different kinds of food, the amount of cholesterol, fats, sodium, calories, and other information about each of those foods, so that if people need the information, where do I turn? Well, it's in your book. They don't have to go out and do other research on their own. They can just simply sit down and determine what kind of diet. It's supposed to be a low cholesterol diet. I mean, you've got all the information in there that they need to tailor a diet to their particular lifestyle, and one that isn't necessarily a bland diet. I think too that a lot of people are concerned about in terms of changing these lifestyle habits that they have.
Well, if you were to come into my house, David, and see the way my family and I eat, you'd never know that we were doing anything different. If you saw us one evening eating meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and gravy, you'd say, how's that possible? And then the next night it's cheeseburgers, and then the night after that it's pizza. How can this be? And on Sunday morning he's eating cheese omelets. Well, you can eat all of those foods by simply learning the tricks of substitutions here and there, buying the low-fat foods, making the proper selections in the supermarket. I mean, my goodness, all these foods are available, and it's not just in a special little section of the store for health nuts, or you don't have to go to a health food store. You can buy non-fat mayonnaise, non-fat ice cream. There's even non-fat hot fudge sauce to put on the. Can you imagine 100% fat-free hot fudge? Seems like an oxymoron, but there it is, ready for you.
It's nice to have that option. And then one other aspect of the book that you touch on too is the discussion of available medications for people, so that they can continue their lifestyles and do it without fear of reoccurrence.
Well, that's a very confusing aspect.
It's a mysterious area for a lot of people.
You're already taking perhaps some medications for other things, arthritis or recurrent headaches, whatever the case might be. Now your doctor prescribes all these new cardiac drugs. How did they work? What are the possible side effects? What should I be watching for? How would they interact with foods and these other drugs? And so we have to walk people through all of that. Knowledge is power.
Well, I know I found 8 Steps to a Healthy Heart to be a very comprehensive book. It includes the physiological and psychological aspects of recovery from heart problems, and it was written in a very educational and informative way. Bob, thank you for joining us today on Discussions With. Good luck with your book.
My pleasure, David.
A presentation of the Hennepin County Library.